You are now connected.
All right, a very good afternoon to everyone, or good morning to everyone, yeah, depending on where you are. So welcome to the final workshop of the day. Yeah, so after all the keynotes, discussion panels, and workshops, I'm sure we must be tired though, yeah, okay. So we're going to end the day with a well-deserved well-being workshop. Wow, look at that. This workshop will focus on avoiding workplace burnout, which is something we can all relate to. Yep. So this workshop will be delivered by the ex-Special Ops Officer, Derek McManus. So I'm just going to read his profile because it's pretty exciting though. Okay. So what Derek is about to tell us about resilience, bouncing back, and optimal performance is worth paying attention to. Why? Because his story is amazing. Okay. So just some stats. He was shot 14 times in less than 5 seconds, massive injuries and severed arteries. He was lying on the ground for 3 hours before being rescued. Doctors said he was just 30 seconds from death and predicted he would never, ever walk properly again. And guess what? 2.5 years later, Derek returned to full duties. Yep. So Derek was a sniper. Yep. Tactical diver and counter-terrorist operative with the police elite star group, and he trained with the military SAS, you've been seeing on TV recently. So I think you'll all be amazed at how he has been able to laugh about all of this after being shot 14 times without losing focus, yep, or being dismissive of the seriousness of the situation. So without further ado, I'm going to invite this awesome Derek up on stage, and he's going to talk to us about how to avoid workplace burnout and keeping well-being. So Derek, stage is yours.
Sensational. Thank you so much, Edmund. That was absolutely great. Great to be here. And as Edmund has alluded to, I'm going to be talking about how to avoid workplace burnout, but not from a general perspective that most people understand. My perspective is going to be from a beyond resilience perspective, beyond resilience to sustaining optimal performance. And this is a mindset rather than a set of tools that we go through. And the mindset is the most important thing. So resilience is something that people have been speaking about for years, and we all know the concept of resilience. Essentially, resilience is the ability to bounce back after something has gone wrong already, after a catastrophe has happened, after we've made a mistake, after we've said something that we don't want to. We work out the solution to it and we bounce back from it. What I talk about is a term that I've coined, which is human durability. And human durability is the ability to sustain optimal performance for the level that you are being trained for or operating at that time. So if you come in as a student at university and you're in as a first-year student, you're not able to operate as a third-year student, but you can be the best possible first-year student by sustaining optimal performance for that level. Now, when you go up into second year and into third year, you will raise that level of performance commensurate with your level of performance now. I would imagine most of the people here have finished their university and gone on to your jobs. Now, you may be in your first year of your job, your second year of your job. You may have got your promotion, you may have got your second promotion. You've got to have a sustainable, optimal performance for the level that you're operating at the moment. That's exactly where I was in Star Group being Special Task and Rescue. That's where I was in Star Group when I went to a job where this offender started shooting and fired 18 times in less than 5 seconds. He hit me 14 times with either bullets or shrapnel. Now, generally, I would show a video at this point, but we've had a little test run. The video wasn't quite running quite smoothly enough. So we've cancelled the video, but I'm going to describe to you what that video shows. The video shows my partner and I driving in our car, driving up to the house where the offender is. There are two cars. There are two cars going up to the house. I'm in the front one, and the video camera operator is in the second one. We drive up to the house. We've got full police blue uniform. and we were wearing police flak vests. Now, I use the term flak vests, and most people have an understanding of what flak vest is. More people have an understanding of what bulletproof vest is. People go, yes, I get that. Can I tell you right now, they ain't bulletproof, but we know what their ability is. They stop a certain type of bullet and a certain type of flak. We call them flak vests. So we went to the front of the house. We knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. However, for the last 20 minutes, we've had one of our snipers sitting in the bush for about the last 20 minutes, just watching the house, watching the offender. We knew he was inside. We knew he should be answering the door. So the sergeant has knocked again, called again. There were 4 members of Star Group at that house at that time, myself and the video camera operator. And when the sergeant has knocked again, there's been no answer. At this stage, I've moved down the side of the house towards a glass sliding door. And as I approach that glass sliding door, the offender starts shooting and I'm the target. And what you hear on that video is the bullets being fired at me firing back at the offender, and then I call out, I'm hit, I'm hit. Now, this video is available either on my website or on YouTube. If you just put in Derek McManus shot 14 times, there are several videos that come up and you will be able to see this video. It's actually a segment of the Channel 9 News, a current affairs program, and they did a 6-minute segment, and this is a portion of that. But what happened after that was I was lying on a narrow concrete path directly below the kitchen window of the house. I'd been shot 14 times, had some massive injuries, and I was bleeding profusely. I was taking a serious look at the possibility of death, and I was scared. But it was right there and then, in that instant, that I think I subconsciously realized that when we face our greatest challenges and changes in our life, then we essentially have 2 choices. Now, this doesn't have to be a challenge and change as big as this incident that I've been through, the shooting. It can be any challenge, any change, anywhere in our lives. As I say, most people watching this will have finished their uni degree, you'll have gone on to get your jobs. So a lot of people will be relating to that workplace stress. How do I lower my workplace stress? But it's also about the challenges and changes that we see in our family life, in our other personal life, in our social life, in our community life, in our love life, in our sporting life. In all these different environments, we will see different challenges and changes. And when we see these challenges and changes, we essentially have the same 2 choices. Our first choice can be to just sit back and wait to see what happens. Wait to see what Mother Nature has in store and just see what happens naturally. Or we sit back and we wait to see what somebody else has in mind. They come along and they go, don't like your situation at all, but I think you've got these options available to you. And so you select one of the options that they have come up with. Or, worst situation possible, you sit back, wait to see what happens, and somebody else then comes along and says, this is what you have to do now. And I don't know about you. I like to have a say about what's happening to me in my future. And I believe that making a decision to fight for what I think is most important is the better decision to make. It is the better option. That first option, fight for what's most important to you at that particular time. And taking that option away with me, knowing that that's the one that I wanted to make, not just then, but in every aspect of my life. My choices are certainly informed by what other people suggest to me, but it certainly isn't the only thing. It's what I want and what drives me. And I think making that decision to fight for what I believe to be most important at that particular time was certainly one of the turning points for me. And as I say, it's one of the things that I've taken away from this for myself. One of the other things that I've taken away from this, though, for myself, on maybe a slightly lighter note, was that I was soon going to find out that this was going to be the best opportunity for me to get the nickname that I've always wanted. Now, that may seem strange to some people that I got shot 14 times and I go, kind of get some great nicknames out of this. I have a sick, twisted, warped sense of humour, and I love to ask an audience as to whether they know police officers themselves. And many of you do know police officers. And the question, obviously, rhetorically in this forum, my question to you rhetorically would be, do those police officers have a twisted sense of humour as well? And most people go, yeah, absolutely, definitely. And we do. We do. It's a natural for us. It's part of our job and it's part of something that we're comfortable with. And I don't shy away from that in any way, shape or form. But as you can imagine, I've got a twisted sense of humour. My colleagues have a twisted sense of humour. And in that environment, it doesn't take long for twisted jokes and nicknames and those sorts of things that start flowing thick and fast. And so what I'd like to do for those people who don't quite understand, how can you make jokes about being shot 14 times? That's way too serious. How can you get lighthearted about that? How can you have twisted jokes and expect somebody else to laugh at that? What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a get well card that I got while I was in hospital. And from here, I'm going to go and share screen. So just excuse me a moment as I set that up. Here we go. I'm just setting that up now. And it's not going the way it should have. Oh, yes, it is. My apologies. Okay, so you should have my shared screen now. So as I say, I'd like to show you the get well card I got while I was in hospital. Let me just repaint this picture for you before I show you this get well card. I've just been shot 14 times, been lying on the ground for 3 hours before they could get me out. A little bit that I'll tell you more about a little bit later is that the first doctor to get to me said he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. And when he did his final assessment, he thought that I was actually about 30 seconds from death. So they've monitored me, saved me, got me into hospital. I'm now lying in hospital. I've still got a massive amount of injuries, a massive amount of rehabilitation in front of me, massive amount of pain. And this is the get well card that they thought most appropriate. If that's it. Have you got that one? Is that coming up on screen? Sensational. So that's the get well card they thought. Bummer of a birthmark out. Now, the saddest thing about this birthday card, get well card, is that it's not the only one that I got. About 3 days later, one of my mates from high school actually walked in with exactly the same card. So I've had a twisted sense of humor for quite some time, right back to when I was in high school. But what I'd like to do now is just tell you a couple of those nicknames that I did get. I'm just positioning things on my screen so that I can see them a little bit better. And it's not going the way I want it to. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a couple of those nicknames very, very quickly, or at least one of them. While I was in hospital, my mates finished the siege. It's the longest siege that's ever run in South Australia. It went for 41 hours. When the offender was arrested and taken to jail, my mates from Star Group started to come in and visit me. And while I was in hospital, one of my mates came in and he's having a conversation with me. And during that conversation, he suddenly stopped. And when he stopped, he said, "Derek, you got shot a lot of times, didn't you?" And in the back of my mind, I'm going, where on earth have you been for the last few days? And I said, well, yes, I did. And he said, and you've got a lot of bullet holes in you now, haven't you? And I've gone, well, yes, I have. He said, what happens when you have a drink of water these days? And from there came the nickname Sprinkler, which has stuck with me pretty much throughout my life. One of the other nicknames that I'll tell you about quickly was something that happened probably about 2 years after the shooting. I got to know lots of different police officers throughout this time because people I never knew were coming to visit me. And there was this one female police officer who'd come to visit me a few times, and I certainly knew her name. I thought she knew my name. And when somebody messes your name up, you sort of question yourself, should I say something, shouldn't I? I thought she was just messing my name up when she's walked in this one day. And she says, "Hello, Donald, how are you?" And I've gone, "Sorry, the name's Derek." She said, "Not anymore. It's Donald because you forgot to duck." And yeah, so that was part of it. Those nicknames have gone on, and it's not just police officers that have given it to me. It's people in the community, people that I do these presentations for, particularly when I run a workshop and people really get to know my sense of humor in a half day, full day, 2-day workshop that I run. Then they start coming up with nicknames. I run workshops in schools, and the school kids come up with nicknames. And believe it or not, none of those nicknames have actually been negative. They've always been positive or fun or something like that. So it's certainly one of those things that we like to embrace. Now, the dark sense of humor, and I'm just going to come off of shared screen again now. I'll go to there, and I'm going to come off the shared screen as I taught you a little bit. All I've got to do is find out where my controls are. Oh, there they are. Right. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that dark sense of humor, because this is one of the places of stress that we do find in the work environment, because some people have a very dark sense of humor and can laugh at so many different things. And some people go, no, that's highly inappropriate at this particular time. There is absolutely no two ways about it. The dark sense of humor suits some people for some situations, and it suits some people for other situations, but it doesn't suit everybody all the time. Okay, and we've got to be empathetic of other people. The other thing that is important about the dark sense of humor is that it doesn't solve a problem. It breaks tension, right, just for a moment. But then we've got to have the tools behind it to be able to implement those tools to manage that situation, manage the stress, manage the overwhelm. There's something that the military talk about, and that's VUCA. And if there's a VUCA situation, this is a cause for stress. And VUCA, V-U-C-A, stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If we hit any of those 4 situations, I'll get my thumb into there as well, any of those 4 situations, volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous, that's when we start going into stress. We start getting overwhelmed. We don't know what's going on, and that's what starts to cause the stress. When we can manage VUCA, manage any of those situations, our stress will go up and we'll go, no, I know what I've got the tools for this, and that'll come back down. Now that's resilience, being able to get up into that situation and then come back down. Durability is about knowing that you are going to make a decision that could possibly put you into a VUCA situation. And when you know you could possibly go into that situation, you start planning contingencies for that. And when you see the signs that say it's starting to go up, bang, you implement that resolution before it gets to that out of control, overwhelming type situation. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Now, I'm going to go back to that dark sense of humor, because I'd like to just reiterate that I've seen lots of police officers in my career who have had the best sense of humor. Doesn't matter what situation they go into, they can make a lighthearted comment, they can break the tension. Everybody can go, oh my gosh, I feel a little bit better. But I've seen these guys crack jokes, and then fall over with depression. And this is why I go back to, it's okay to break the tension with a dark sense of humor, but you've got to have the tools to be able to manage that VUCA situation afterwards. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to go back to sharing screen, because I'd like to share with you a philosophy or a mindset mantra that I use in my work. There we go. Okay. And this mindset mantra is stay strong, find a system, work the system, tweak the system. We need to stay strong physically, mentally, and emotionally. And this is really important to hit all 3 spots. Okay. We all know that physically, if we're going to be taking on some sort of activity task, we need to have the physical capacity to be able to do it. And this is not just about being physically fit, running around for sport and all the rest of it. It's also about, if I'm going to take on a task of research, am I physically fit enough? Am I not in a sick condition, not run down, not exhausted, slept well enough to be able to take on those tasks? So that's all incorporated in that physical conditioning. The mental, I like to think of the mental as the intellectual side. Do I understand the parameters of what I'm going to be taking on? Do I understand policies, procedures, legislation, norms, expectations of me? It's all the intellectual side of how we prepare for the challenge that we're going to take on. But the last one is emotion. And as much as people go, yes, I understand the emotional side, quite often we underrate its importance. And the emotional side is one of the things that managed to keep me alive. My emotion went high, and then I was able to bring my emotion back down so that I was able to implement all those things that I knew I needed to do for me to survive. So understanding our emotion, when our emotion and our rational thinking in our brain sit on an even plane, right? We can plan, we can contemplate, we can debate, we can get creative because everything's calm and predictable. There is no overwhelm. But as soon as we hit one of those VUCA situations, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and this describes a wide variety of things that we experience in life, our emotions go high and our rational thinking goes low. And when our emotions go high and our rational thinking is low, our rational thinking is now in fight and flight. This is absolute panic mode. This is not when we do the smart stuff. This is when we do the silly stuff, the stupid stuff, the stuff that we know better, but our emotions are so high that we've lost control of them. Our rational thinking has dropped down. We're in fight and flight mode, and it's absolute panic. We're just doing the easiest things possible, the things that we know we've done in the past, and maybe we've got some sort of result. It's not the things that we want to. Now, it's not about saying I'm going to cut out my emotions. We can't. We are emotional beings. We need to understand and manage our emotions. And so when our emotions go high and our rational thinking is low, we've got to understand that while the emotion is high, we shouldn't be making decisions and taking action until we can get the emotions back down and the rational thinking back up. Now, they may not get onto an even plane, right? They may only get close to each other. But the closer that we can get them, the more chance we've got of putting in rational thinking and doing the things that we want to do. What I'm going to be talking about today is how do we bring the emotion back down, the rational thinking back up, and get them back onto that even plane. Or with human durability, how do we diffuse that so the emotions don't go up? Or if they do go up, they come back down almost straight away. And there's a gap between fight and flight, and it's called freeze, right? Whenever we experience something, the first thing that we experience is a freeze moment. It's that moment where the brain goes, I don't know what's going on. There's a change. What do? Do I run away or do I fight? And it's minimizing that gap moment is very, very important. So staying strong physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, the easiest way to do this is to be very clear about the vision you have for the future. What is it that you want to achieve? Now, this doesn't have to be a massive vision. This can simply be the result you want from the effort you're about to put in. This could be a massive research project. This could be an application for a job, but it could also be as simple as taking the children or your nephews and nieces, whatever it might be, to the movies for the day. What's the result you want from taking your nieces or nephews to the movies for the day? You all want to have a good time, and you need to be able to anticipate what are going to be the challenges for that and what are going to be the opportunities. But it's about having that clear vision of what you want, and then being driven to actually get it. The second part of it is once you find the system, once you know what your vision is, it's about finding the system that works for you. Now, lots of people will talk about the systems that work for them. When I hit this sort of challenge, I put this system in place. This is the system that I use. Somebody else will use a completely different system. Neither of those systems may work for you. You may be able to take a little bit of this one or a little bit of that one, but you've got to find what works for you. Now, the easiest way to find your system is to take a look in your background, take a look in your past. What have you done well in the past and how have you put it in place? Every one of you listening today are in the place you are because of successes you've had in the past, right? The system that you have used in the past to get you here is the system that will take you into the future, okay? And once you find your system, it's about immersing yourself in that system. Work it, work it, work it. And it really is just about committing to it. There's an old saying that says, when we are 99% committed, things are still hard. because there's that 1% of doubt where you go, maybe. And I know it's 99%. You are so close to being absolutely committed, but that 1% throws that doubt in your mind. When we are 100% committed, there is no doubt. Everything's simple because everything else gets left aside and we just go, no, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. I'm 100% committed to it. And we only have to be committed for a period of time and then we go and do our other things. 99% committed is hard. 100% committed is easy. It's just absolute commitment to it. So once we work it, we're immersing it. We will then get to a point where it either amplifies, so it starts to build up, we get the results we want, and we need to throw a tweak of leveraging. Whatever it is that's working well, leverage it, identify it, leverage it, use it to make it even better. If it starts to plateau, we've got to work out, is this actually where I want it to be at the moment? Is this the level where I want to be performing? And do I need to tweak it to get it better or avoid drop off? But if it starts to decline, if it starts to drop off, that's when we've just got to throw that tweak in of, actually, Amanda suggested I could maybe do that. That doesn't fit. Oh, Tom. Actually, I like the thing that Tom did. Or I read this book the other day and it suggested maybe. It's whatever resonates with you. We will take suggestions from everywhere and we should, but only implement the ones that resonate with you. So that's the mantra that I'd like you to remember. And you'll see where it fits into my story as I tell you a little bit more about that shooting. Stay strong, find your system, work your system, and tweak your system. I'm going to stop the share screen now and come back to you. Now, what I'd like to suggest is that there are many questions going into the question box already, or into the chat box already. Sam is going to be monitoring that for me. And Sam, could I ask you that if somebody puts in a question into the chat box that relates to what we're talking about now, you highlight it for me, because I'm not going to try and monitor the chat box as well. I just want to be able to talk to you. But if there's something that pops in there, you go, Derek, actually, this is relevant. Can I interrupt? You won't throw me off. And I would like to encourage everybody that if you have a thought, if you have a question, throw it into the chat box. And if we don't talk about it immediately, then Sam's going to pull out the best ones or the most relevant ones towards the end. And Edmund, I'd certainly encourage you to monitor that as well. But I'd love to hear all the questions that you have, all the thoughts that run through your mind. And one of the things that I really love, and this is, again, the essence of human durability, part of it is being vulnerable enough to be able to go, do you know something? I might be making a mistake, so I'm going to take suggestions from elsewhere. I like people to challenge me, and I'm vulnerable enough to take those. So if there's something in here that you go, no, that doesn't seem to work for me, I need to ask a question about that, please throw it in the chat box, because two things might come out of it. One is that I'm not explaining it well enough, right? I may have my interpretation. You may need a different interpretation. Very happy to have that discussion. The second thing that could happen is that you may have a greater insight than what I have into what I'm discussing. And when you suggest something, I might go, oh, wow, that's challenging me, but actually I really like it. And you'll educate me as well. So if there's something that runs through your mind, either I can explain it better or I'm going to learn out of it as well. So please throw whatever there is. And I see there's lots of questions coming in there. So Sam, if there's anything in there that is coming in, please give me a heads up. So I'm going to tell you more about that story of being shot now. And you'll see where that mindset fits in. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of other models afterwards. The other thing that I've got to monitor here is time, and just make sure that I don't run out of time. Oh, there it is. Okay, so as we approach that, as I approached that glass sliding door going down the side of the house, and he started to shoot, he was using a rifle, a Chinese military rifle. It's a 308 or a 7.62. For those people who know weapons, for those who don't, it is military weapon. The bullets fired are the same the military use when they go to war. And this person fired 18 times in less than 5 seconds. I was hit 14 times in less than 5 seconds. What I'd like to do now is just show you a couple of photographs that will graphically display the injuries that I was dealing with. And I like to show you these just to give you some idea of what I was dealing with while I was lying on the ground. I'm not going to dwell on these photographs for too long. In a half day, full day, 2-day workshop that I run around getting your mind right into this and some of the tools and then implementing them into scenarios that suit your particular situation, I go into these photos in a bit more depth and we delve into them, because some of these photos just remind me of really salient messages, bizarre as it may seem. But I'm just going to show you a couple of them at the moment. So if this shares screen again now, which it will, and so this is the first photograph that I'm going to show you. If it comes up, there we go. And this is me being slid into the back of the ambulance. The doctor in the top left-hand corner there, that is Dr. Bill Griggs. He was the first doctor to get to me. When he got to me, he actually said he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. I had a conversation with him about 4 months after the shooting. And I said to him, you know, what was it like for you? How did you, what were you experiencing? And obviously, thank you for doing what you did. But he said to me, Derek, do you know that when I first got to you, I didn't know whether you were dead or alive. There was no color, there was no sound, there was no movement, and you weren't breathing. I actually thought you were already dead. And I thought to myself, should I even bother taking a look? My response to that was, seriously? You thought about it? But he went on to say that as he stood there and was looking at me, there was a small flicker of my eyelid and I took a last gasping breath. And he said, when I saw this last gasping breath, I thought, well, maybe I may as well take a look. I've gone, oh, thanks very much for that. What he didn't tell me though, and what is very important to now realize, because he didn't tell me, I had to work this out later. When he was treating me, he was actually standing in direct line of fire from the bullets and they were whizzing around his ears. And he wasn't just making a decision about, should I try and save this guy's life? It was, should I risk my life to try and save this guy's life? Should I risk the team that are standing with me to save this guy's life? And so it was a huge statement from him about his commitment to doing the job that he'd been asked to do. An absolutely sensational thing. But as you can see in this photograph, there's all sorts of monitors on me there. There's blood being pumped into me. There's oxygen going to my mouth, my nose. There's thermal blankets there to try and retain whatever heat that I had left, and there was very little of that. Now, before I tell you this next little bit, what I'd like to make very clear is that I do some very risky things in my life. And obviously being in Star Group was a high risk situation on a regular basis. Even though I'm not in Star Group now, I still do a lot of risky things in my life, but I don't see myself as a risk taker per se. And that's very, very salient for me. I'm not a risk taker. I see myself as a risk manager and not a risk taker. And certainly in the tourism industry, some of the things that you're going to be trying are going to be risky. And some of the things that you think, oh, we could try that because it worked over there. So if it worked over there, maybe it'll work for us. Let's not do that. Just because it worked over there doesn't mean it will work for you. That's risk taking. It's not risk management. Yes, we can learn from what they've done, but then we've got to do our own assessments of, do I have the skills? Do I have the resources? Do I have the background? Do I have the infrastructure? Do I have the support team? We need to take a look at all of those and then decide, is this risk worth taking for my environment and myself at that time? I see myself as a risk manager, not a risk taker, even though I do a lot of risky things in my life. And I need to make that point very clear, not just for me, but for you as well. So let's not just be risk takers for the sake of somebody else is doing it. Let's take a very salient look at it and work out what's important for us and whether we do have the resources. Now, having said that, I don't disregard risk. And that's a very important point, because what I'd like to tell you now is the thoughts that were running through my mind as they were sliding me into the back of the ambulance. Now, as you can imagine, it's a very serious situation. Everything, there's still bullets being shot and fired around the place. There's still a little bit of danger here. But as they were sliding me into the back of the ambulance, my mind just wandered off to somewhere else. And I thought to myself, I've got dive training tomorrow. And you know, sometimes when we all get into those desperate situations where we really need to focus. We might be trying to finish a project, crunch some numbers on a project or whatever it might be. We really need to focus, but our mind wanders off. That's what was kind of happening to me here. And I thought, I've got dive training tomorrow. And I knew that the senior sergeant in charge of dive training was a tyrant. If you didn't turn up on time, if you didn't let him know what was going on, there was hell to pay when you did see him next. And I thought to myself, I need to make sure he knows what's going on. So I saw one of the other divers not too far away from me, and I've called him over. Pato, get over here, get over here. And as Pato's come running up to me, you can imagine his eyes absolutely massive. He's staring down at me, and I'm sure he's looking for a dying declaration or a pearl of wisdom or some message of love to my family. And I said, Pato, apologize to Jeffo because I may not make dive training tomorrow. And he's just looked at me and gone, you're a clown, and turned and walked away. But adversity is the biggest killer of creativity. When we get into those adverse situations, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, our emotions go high and our rational thinking goes low. We just need to be able to break the tension a little bit, because that allows our minds to relax and then our bodies to relax. And then we can start thinking outside the square. And as I say, it doesn't have to be a shooting. It doesn't have to be a physical trauma for this. When we're going into a meeting with our boss and we go, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. Am I going to get sacked? Are they going to approve my project? Are they going to give me new people on my team? What's going on? That's a VUCA situation. It's volatile. It's uncertain. There's some ambiguity there. And our emotions go high through the psychological trauma, and our rational thinking goes low as well. We've got to be able to bring them down and our rational thinking back up. But being able to break that tension just with a little bit of lightheartedness sometimes really helps to start the process, because then you can look at opportunities or possibilities. And that's what certainly happened in this situation. It didn't change the behavior of the doctor or the ambulance officers, but they seemed to relax a little bit. And they started thinking, well, maybe this isn't as serious. As I say, they did everything exactly the same. It was just the stress on themselves and the way they operated just changed slightly. This is my left forearm. This is my left forearm. It should be on the screen by now. This is my left forearm. A single bullet came through my left forearm. It came from this direction and exited out the other side. That piece of red gauze there is skin graft holding that in place. The bullet went through there. It severed the main artery, and doctors don't know why that artery just didn't bleed out, but it didn't. The ends of it just fibrillated and closed off themselves, whereas arteries, as soon as you sever an artery, you should bleed out within minutes. Doctors have no idea why it fibrillated, but I was very fortunate it did. This is the bone. This is where the bullet actually went through. And if you have a look to the left of the screen, you'll see that there's another small break close to my wrist. So the bone was broken in about 2 places. And those little bits of white are little bits of shrapnel or bits of bone that are still floating around in my arm today. And I still have this 5-inch metal plate and half a dozen screws still floating around in my arm. The last photo that I want to show you is the photo of my wrist. Now, that little bit of red lump in the middle there is where a piece of shrapnel hit my right wrist. And that piece of shrapnel was in there for the entire time, after about 2 hours of lying on the ground. And if you can imagine in your mind, bullets were being fired through the bricks in the wall above me, dust was falling into my eyes, bullets were being fired all around the house on the day for the entire 3 hours I was on the ground. But after about 2 hours, this piece of shrapnel became the most annoying, frustrating, irritating thing you can possibly imagine. And I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to take it out and get rid of it and get rid of this annoyance, and then I can focus on things. But as I started to pick it out, basic training kicked in for me. And basic training for first aid is leave well enough alone. If you don't need to touch it, just cover it, leave it, wait until you get to hospital, let them deal with it. Fortunately, basic training kicked in for me, and I did leave it there, because that piece of shrapnel had also severed an artery. And if I'd pulled that piece of shrapnel out, then that artery probably would have bled and I probably wouldn't have been here today. So basic training, most of us have heard when things start going wrong, let's go back to basics. I'd like to redefine back to basics for you and throw the term out and replace that with let's go back to baseline. And your baseline is where you know that your performance is 100% reliable, where you know that everything you do is going to go exactly the way you want to. It's comfortable, it's predictable, and there is no doubt in your mind. And in this zone where you know that everything is going to go well, there's also no stress because you're confident, you're comfortable, everything's going to go well. Now, your baseline is very different to the basics. If we get onto our baseline of performance and then we take on a challenge and that crashes and burns and we burn all the way back down to basics, then basics is the day that we started in the job, the first day we started the project, the first time we encountered whatever it might be. Going back to basics for any of you listening to this is way too low. You need to know where your baseline is so that when you take on a project or a challenge and you crash and you burn back to baseline. And when you come back to your baseline, this is where you regain your confidence. You get back to baseline, you're able to go, let me just relax here. There's no stress here. I know that things are going to go well. I know that I can perform 100% reliably in this place, right? And it's no stress. You relax, you get your confidence back, you get your courage, your self-belief in yourself again, and then you can take on the next challenge, right? But if we burn back to baseline, then we've got to build all that way back up to basics and then keep on building. And I'm going to elaborate on this more on a continuum of human durability in a moment. But I want you to embrace that concept of if things go wrong, let's go back to our baseline where you know you're 100% reliable. I am actually going to show you one more photograph. It's this one here. And this photograph was taken just 5 days after the shooting. I'm obviously still in hospital. And this photograph was actually taken for evidentiary purposes, for going to court to just show all the injuries. Now, I'm not going to elaborate on all the injuries. We don't actually have time for that. But I'm just going to tell you that people say, how could I possibly be smiling at this particular time? I'm going to come off of share screen now so that I can talk to you directly so that we can, well, you can see me better and you're not being exposed to those photographs. A lot of people say, how could I possibly be smiling? For me, this is a part of human durability as well. I'd taken responsibility for my choices, my actions, the possible consequences, and then the future there afterwards, prior to this actually happening. This is going back to what I was saying before. Anticipate what your challenges might be and then how you might handle them if they do happen. And know the signs that tell you it's going one way or the other. So when I joined Star Group, I knew that there was a possibility that I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. 5 years prior to the shooting, I had a conversation with my wife around the fact that if I get shot, what's your life going to look like? Because it's not just about me. And it's not just about you either. We need to think about our teams, our families, and the clients that we are working for. We are going to make choices that are going to put us in circumstances. What are the possible consequences of that? And are we prepared to manage it? And that's why I had this conversation with my wife. If I die, yes, I'm dead, but what's your life going to look like? And this was to ensure that she knew what the risks were and she was still fully on board with me, right? Because then if something does go wrong, you're able to say, we discussed this, our options, our possibilities are these, and let's move forward. It doesn't come to your client, your team, your family as something, oh, you didn't tell me about this, I'm not prepared for it. So I had this conversation 5 years beforehand, and we discussed things such as, does she go on and get married if I die? Does she go on and get married and have someone help her look after the children? Does she stay a single mother and look after the children? And when the children leave home, then she goes on and has another married life with someone else. It wasn't about me giving her permission. It was about her knowing that we've discussed it and whatever option she chose was fine by me. Because if we didn't have that discussion, she may go through life and go, oh, I'd love to get in a relationship with someone. I know they'd be good to the children, but is that what Derek would want? So it was having that discussion so it's really, really clear. And as much as we can have really tough discussions like that, it doesn't always have to be just serious. That moment of lightheartedness. I also threw that moment of lightheartedness in there as well. So I said, you've got the option. You may go on and get married. You may stay single, completely up to you. But the third option you might like to consider is just building a little shrine in the corner, worshiping me every day. And apparently that one wasn't all that popular, but it doesn't always have to be just a stressful discussion. We can break that tension and then still get on with the serious stuff as well. But what I did after that was I went away for myself and I said, if I do get shot, what do I want to do as a perfect response to it? And am I prepared to deal with that as well? And the job that I was doing, the value it was to community, all those altruistic things, I believed that even if I died doing that, that was going to be worthwhile. It's actually one of the other discussions I had with my wife. If I do die, what are you going to tell my children about the person I was and why I was doing this job and I knew I may die? So that was a very important discussion. And again, this is all that future thinking of what's the possible response is going to be. But I looked at the shooting and said, if I get shot, what would I like to do as an absolute perfect response? A, B, C, D. And that would be absolutely sensational if everything went perfectly right. And sometimes we think, if I think these things through, I've got every chance of making it perfect. So I don't even want to think about the bad things. But I thought about the bad things too, because sometimes they happen too. I may not be able to control all the situation, and I may end up down this end in chaos. But if it ends up down there in chaos, what can I do to influence it to get it closer back to absolute perfection? And it was thinking those three things through beforehand that gave me the ability to relax within it. And the one thing that I said to my wife was that if I get shot and I don't die, you need to know that anything better than death is going to be a bonus. And I believe that's why I had that smile. I believe that's why I was able to be lighthearted in the moment that I was being shot. And it's why I was able to be lighthearted in the moment of sliding into the back of the ambulance, because anything better than death was going to be a bonus to me. I knew it was there, but I knew that anything better than that was going to be a bonus. And I'd like you to think about that as well. What's bottom line for you? And what are the signs that tell you you are getting close to bottom line and you've got to make a decision? No, I've got to stop this and take a different action so that I avoid that. Okay, what's bottom line for you? Anything better than death was going to be a bonus for me. And that's why I was able to smile, be lighthearted, while still doing what I needed to do. I was lying on the ground for 3 hours after being shot though. And during that 3 hours, I knew that there were 4 things that I needed to do to be able to give myself the best chance of survival. And these 4 things are as applicable to that situation as they are to you and your VUCA situations as well. The first one was I needed to control panic, not let panic take control of the situation. The easiest way to control panic is do your thinking beforehand, do your planning beforehand, just as I did. I may get shot, and if I do get shot, what would I like as a perfect response? And what would it look like if it's in chaos? And start planning for all those contingencies, right? So we can control panic. We've got some idea of what might happen. We've got some idea of how we're going to deal with it, right? The second one that I needed to do was control shock. Now, shock is the body's response to trauma. And I know that when I go into shock, whether it's physical shock or psychological shock, emotional shock, whatever it might be, emotions go high, rational thinking goes low. Rational thinking goes low because the amygdala on the side of the brain flips into motion and says, okay, you're in fight and flight mode. We need to take blood away from the brain, not all of it, but mainly from the frontal lobe where we do our creative thinking. And I need to reroute that to the major organs of the body for fight and flight. By being able to control the physiological response of our body, we're able to control shock. Yes, instantly the amygdala's gone, throw the blood back there, but by controlling panic, I was also able to control my emotions. I was able to relax my body and get the blood flowing back up to that frontal lobe. And this is important for you as well. The more we're planned beforehand, the easier it is to put these things in place. The last 2 things that I knew I needed to do was I needed to control shock and I needed to, not to control shock, I needed to slow down my heart rate, and I needed to slow down my breathing. Because if I could control those 4 things, I'd be able to slow down my rate of bleeding, and I'd be able to survive for just a little bit longer. But those things are applicable for you with your challenges as well. If we can slow that process down, we can better manage VUCA, whether it's a volatile situation, whether it's a challenge that's going wrong, whatever it might be. The last thing that I'm going to share with you, and I know I'm getting low in time, is this model here. If it goes to that model, and this is the continuum of human durability. And I'm going to give you a very quick oversight of this. Okay, so whenever we start a new challenge, we start as fragile. And fragile is when we are new, we're learning, we're making mistakes, and we're looking to experiment to see what works, what doesn't work. We understand that when somebody starts new in our team, we know that they need some time to get used to it, but we're not that gentle on ourselves. Okay, we need to learn that when it's a new project, we might be fragile, right? We want to move out of fragility and we want to get to resilience. Resilience is where we can problem solve, but resilience is confident, relaxed, self-assured, but it's also reactive, responsive, right? We are waiting for something to go wrong so that we can bounce back, okay? This is a good, strong place to be. And when you've got the skills and you're able to go, I'm resilient, I can bounce back, I can solve any problem. It's a good, strong place to be. And I enthusiastically encourage you to embrace that. Moving from fragility to resilience, the easiest way to do that is to have someone to give us guidance, coaching, mentoring, and having a manager or a supporter that is willing to let you gain some experience so that you learn how to deal with it. But resilience, I don't think is good enough. I think we can go beyond resilience to what I call durability. And that's being prepared, proactive, insightful. And this, as I said before, is the place where there is no stress. It's where we're totally relaxed. Everything we know is going to go absolutely perfectly well. And to move from resilience to durability, it's about confidence, courage, belief in ourselves, in our own capacity, and belief in the systems. And this is the systems that work for you, but it's also the systems of your infrastructure as well. You have to know that they are in the right place. Now, when we take on a challenge, right, we will move from that point of being durable up to the next level. And when we move up to that next level, right, we slide back because we're taking on a new challenge and there is something new to learn. This will take you to that point of resilience again. If you work properly along with your confidence, your courage, your capacity, you'll move back to being durable and you'll move up and take the next challenge, back to resilient. And this goes on throughout life. And there are lots of models that I work with in the workshops that give more relevance or understanding of how this process works. But what I want you to understand is that if you take a fragile person and you give them a challenge, they've got nowhere to go, right? And they are just going to become more fragile. This applies to you as well as the teams you work with. If you take a person who is resilient and you give them a challenge, they're going to move up and they're going to become fragile because they were good at that level, but now they've taken on a challenge, they've slid back a little bit and they've gone back to fragile. But if you take someone who's durable, they will be the best they possibly are, and they'll go up to that next challenge, but they'll just be resilient. Now, when they get up to resilient, you know that it's just the confidence, the courage, belief in themselves, belief in their systems that they need to build, and they will take on another challenge again. And this happens every time we go up a level. And if we go up enough levels, there's going to be a challenge where we eventually get knocked back to fragility, just the same as when COVID hit us and we didn't know what we were doing. Most of us got knocked back to that fragile state. But if we work through this process of if we're moving from fragile, let's get some coaching, guidance, mentoring, some assistance from the people around us to support us. And then when we get to resilient, let's build our confidence, our courage, our capacity, our belief in ourselves, our belief in our systems, and we will get back and we will keep on going. And I could keep on going and tell you more about this all day long. But essentially for me, this is about, and I can't find out where I stopped sharing screen. Where have I gone?
Yep,
I've
Derek, sorry to interrupt, but we just have 5 more minutes, so we just want to
Yep, absolutely.
get some questions in.
So,
Yep.
okay, I have stopped sharing screen, so that's good. Okay, so
Okay.
let's just have a, gosh,
All right.
I don't know how to get
So,
out of this now.
all right. So, once again, thanks, Derek, for the inspiring presentation and sharing your courageous story. I'm sure the academics in this room can truly relate to the VUCA and human durability mindset to help us manage our well-being and increase our resilience. I think is very brilliant of you. I actually have a new nickname for you. I was thinking about a nickname. Yep, and I was thinking of giving you a nickname of the Iron Cat with 9 lives.
Right, the Iron
New
Cat.
one.
I
Yeah.
have not heard that one before. That would be just awesome. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
excellent, Edmund. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess more importantly, on behalf of the JHTM delegates, we really wanted to thank you for your presentation and also to salute you for putting your life on the line to protect the broader community to make this world a safer place. So really thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Yeah. All right.
Thank
Okay.
you so
So
much.
we have a couple of questions, but I think as you were presenting, you kind of answered the questions in a way. But there was one question from Ali. He was saying that, what do you want to be remembered for what you haven't done yet?
Wow. Wow. That's a great question. Do you know, I think the thing that is most important to me relates back to thinking about my children. There's part of me that wants to leave a legacy, which is this human durability. It's not something I plan to start off with. If that goes on and catches on, that would be wonderful. But the greatest legacy that I want to leave behind me is just being a good person. And it really is just being a good person in my community, in my relationships, in my interactions with other people. It's just being that good person, and we can all make that choice. We don't have to prove ourselves at the highest level. If we are just good people, that will take us to the highest level in lots of different ways. And that's a really deep question, and I'd love to nuance that and get into the depths of it. But essentially for me, if people remember me just as being a nice guy. In fact, I was interviewed on a podcast, and they said, how did you want to be interviewed? Did you want to be interviewed as XYZ type person? And I've gone, just introduce me as the guy who talks about stuff that makes a difference for people. And that's essentially how we did it. And that's just how I see it. So thank you. That's a great question.
Yep. All right. Awesome. So we just want to open up again. Is there any last questions?
Okay, so I can see a question in there while anybody else wants to type one in. Did you know some of the antecedents, the predictors of this person's, of a person's durability? Do you know some of the antecedents? Sorry, just from a theoretical. Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that I like to look at most is what I was saying before. What are your past behaviors? Okay, because in your behaviors, there are strengths that we need to leverage. Lots of people talk about SWOT analysis for businesses and projects and all the rest of it. When I do my workshops, I get people to do a personal SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What are your threats? Right, and these are the antecedents that we need to look at. Okay, what are the strengths that you've had in the past that got you? What are the threats that you see in the future, and how can you better prepare for them? The greatest asset that we have is the mind that we have on top of our shoulders. And going through that process, and certainly the workshops that I do, people get that greater insight into themselves. And the greater insight we have into ourselves, the greater chance that we have of being mentally fit for the future. And actually, I'm just going to elaborate on the mental fitness side of it. I was on LinkedIn and somebody was talking about mental toughness, and I actually decided I don't like the term mental toughness. It's kind of like, let's go back to basics. It's a term that everybody uses, but I don't think it's the best term. Toughness kind of implies that I'm so tough, I'm not going to break, I'm going to be able to keep on going. I don't like that term. People see me as the tough guy. I'm not a tough guy. I break the same as anybody else. What I like to work on, and in my programs, I work on mental fitness, mental agility, and mental strength. And if we've got those three assets, the fitness, we've been through it before, we understand what we need to do to manage that challenge. We've got agility. This is better than flexibility. And then we build the strength behind it. And strength is built by practicing and getting so far that we hurt, and then looking at what we've done and then going further. But mental fitness, agility, and strength.
All
So
right.
is there any other final questions?
All right. I think we might have to wrap this up because, yep, Zoom is going to kick us out very soon. We only have about 30 seconds more to go. So once again, Derek, thank you for this wonderful presentation. It's one of the best touching presentations I've ever been through. So thank you
so much.
for touching us and making us feel alive again. Yep. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of day one of the JHCM Symposium. Yep. Hopefully you have gotten as much as out of all the different workshops and discussions. So tomorrow we have an exciting program whereby we're going to kick off, right? I think at 4:15 p.m. with the discussion panel about the new normal of tourism research, opportunities and challenges. So hope to see you tomorrow. Have a nice day. Take care, be safe, and work on your well-being though. All right. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Right, see you
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.